Hello, everyone. I would just like to say thank you and welcome. And we will be starting the session very shortly. Bear with us. All right. Hello, everybody. Good evening, Indonesia. Good afternoon and good morning to everyone joining us from the Western Hemisphere. I hope you are all healthy and in good spirit despite the circumstances that we are in right now. My name is Arif Prasetyo. I'm the VP Communication of PMI Indonesia chapter. And today I will be your host and moderator for this session. On behalf of the Board of Directors, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to you all to the 13th session of PRANKS, the Project Management Knowledge Sharing. For the first to the show or to the session, PRANKS is a regular program by the Indonesian chapter inviting subject matter experts across different industries to share their knowledge, experience to the project management community in Indonesia, and now in other parts of the world as well. The session is held today in collaboration with the Project Business Foundation, and we would like to welcome the members of the foundations who are with us today. But before we start, I would just like to quickly touch on some ground rules for the webinar. So the session is being recorded so that it can be enjoyed by a greater audience later on. So I would like to kindly ask and appreciate if everyone can mute their lines to minimize interruptions and to preserve the quality of the webinar. During the session, you may ask questions by typing it in the chat box, or if you have a very burning question that you would like to ask directly to Oliver, then you are also welcome to do so. Those of the participants who are joining from our YouTube channels, also welcome to you all. And you may type your comments or questions in the comment section of the YouTube video. And then our officers will pass them on to us here and it will be addressed accordingly. For chapter members who are continuing their education, your PDUs will be automatically submitted by the chapter. And for the non-chapter members, if you would like to have your PDU submitted on your behalf, or if you need to request an e-certificate, you can do so by filling up a form that will be shared with you by our team in the chat box. Okay, so that is the basic ground rules for today. And without further ado, let's begin the session. So today, session takes the topic of cross-corporate projects and the dynamics surrounding it. Some of us are managing projects that involve multiple corporations. Now you may be on the customer side of a project, and you may be on the contract side, and some of you may be playing both roles. a contractor providing services to a customer, but at the same time, you are also a customer for your vendors or your suppliers. So the intricacies or the complexity of these cross-corporate projects, it spans from contract models, the managing of your suppliers, and ultimately your profitability, which is one of the key differentiator in project business. And today, we are very honored and very happy and excited to have with us a very special guest joining us from Munich, Germany, Mr. Oliver Lehmann. Oliver is a seasoned trainer, project management and project business management. He's been a trainer since 1995, and some of you are probably familiar with the question banks or some of the PMP preparation packages that is published on the internet. And he continues till this day to train and serve his customers from major international corporations to the smaller companies. Oliver co-founded the Project Business Foundation in 2019 after realizing that a sharper focus is needed for people practicing project business management. He has written 2 books, Situational Project Management and Project Business Management. Oliver has also published 30 papers with a focus on project business. And he is also a volunteer for Project Management Institute since 2002. So Oliver, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be with us today, the Indonesian chapter members, and to share with us your knowledge and experience. And I will now pass the stage to you.
Arif, many thanks. And actually, we're almost done. You said everything that needed to be said, and I don't have much to. I have enough to add. No, sorry. No. I think for the beginning, for the start, we have a poll, don't we? Just to know who is here. So may I ask you to do the poll?
I apologize for that. I got too excited and
no
I forgot
problem.
the poll.
Yeah.
So for everyone on the call or on the webinar, I'm going to launch a poll for you to participate in. And it's very relevant to the topic of today. So I appreciate if you could participate. So in what position does your employer or you, or maybe as a self-employed freelancer, typically act in project business? Are you a paying customer? Are you a paid contractor? Or are you both sandwiched as a prime contractor between a customer and a supplier? Or are you currently not involved in project business? Or if you are still not sure the difference between the two, that's also okay. You can indicate your answers below. Okay, so we have 70% of the people voting, 75. Thank you very much for your participation. I'll wait a couple of more seconds, I guess, before I end the poll. Okay, 80% participant. Oliver, is that okay?
That's perfect.
All right. Okay, so most of the participants, there is a tight result between a paying customer and a paid contractor. And 20%, or 9 respondents, responded as sandwiched as a prime contractor. And 8% is a combination of not being involved in project business currently, and I'm not sure, I cannot say.
Yep.
Okay.
Great. Very, very friendly to do that at the beginning. It helps me to understand who the audience is. It's also interesting for you. And what we see here is, apart from the 7 and 11, say almost 20% at the bottom, so 4 out of 5 in general are somehow involved with project business management on a customer side, on a contractor side, or as you correctly said, on both sides as a prime contractor between a customer and a subcontractor, or maybe lots of subcontractors there. And that's part of the complexity that we see today. So thank you for participating in that. I was asked by the chapter, and I think it's a good idea to ask that, to have a focus very much on Q&A and on discussions and on an interactive session. So what I would like to do is to give you a brief introduction into project business management, what it really means to be in a cross-corporate project setting on the side of a customer or on the side of a contractor. So for those of you who do not know me or not know much about me, here's some corner data about myself. And you said correctly, I've been a volunteer at PMI for a long time. And what we do at the Project Business Foundation is not in competition with PMI. We collaborate with PMI. We do it here. We did it also with other activities. We had some research done together. So it's much more the question of where is the focus than any competitive setting or so. We are not planning to compete with PMI, and I think PMI is not and has no interest in doing that with us. We collaborate, we work together, but we have a very tight focus. And I should also say, in the Project Business Foundation, it's a small organization. We are young. We are less than a year old, and our development was became a bit difficult, of course, with COVID-19. When you start something new and then you get blocked again in your work, you really feel it. On the other side, we found that it's very important just in these days to talk about project business, because project business, I think, is one of those businesses that are most hurt by this COVID crisis. It hurts a lot of organizations. And I just read an article that, depending on the industry, maybe we will see maybe 25% of contractor companies, of companies that work for others in projects, may go bankrupt, or maybe some of them finish business peacefully, others really go bankrupt. We will see people laid off, and we will see their customers and their subcontractors suffering. So I think it's a very big topic at the moment. And the question, how can we bring more certainty in project business in these times, is a very important question. So first, I'd like to give you an understanding what this cross-corporate project management, what this really is about, what project business management really is about, what is happening on the marketplace, and maybe also why it is happening, so that you have a better understanding what the things are that we are talking about. Then I would like to talk with you about the major challenges. It's challenges on the organizations that do that. But of course, it's even more, I think, that's me as a trainer, what I'm even more concerned with is the challenges on people. When I talk to students in class, maybe directly in the classroom, I had this last week, or online in a setting as we have it here, I have to understand the people I'm talking to. I have to understand their concerns and their problems and their hopes and their visions and everything, to make a seminar interesting for them. And the same is, of course, true here. So what are the challenges that people are facing? And the next thing, and this should be the time-wise, the majority of our 1.5 hours, should be questions, answers, discussions, and so on. But as Arif correctly said, if you have a question in between and something is really burning at the moment, please ask it, and I may directly answer it. I like this kind of discussion much more than a monologue where it's just me talking and that's it all. First of all, what is cross-corporate project management about? What we see here is a very traditional cross-functional matrix, a matrix where we have an organization. The organization does internal projects. As we see, there is a project with a team. Maybe they have several projects at a time. And now this team takes the human resources, the team members from out of these departments and divisions, And that's what we normally have. It's called cross-functional, it's called matrix. There may be a strong matrix, which means the project manager is in a strong position. Most of these internal projects, by the way, are weak matrix, which means they have a lot of difficulties to get the people into the team and to avoid that they are taken away again at some point in time, that they really do the job for the project. So that's a difficulty in a cross-functional project. It's typically intern inside the organization. Now, what we see more and more is cross-corporate projects. These are projects where the team is not built from inside the organization that wants to use the results. It comes from different organizations. In my example, the customer contributes to this team, but there are also contractors. And one of the contractors is a prime contractor with, in the example here, 2 subcontractors, and you may go on further like that. So what you have is that your project is not staffed and is not done by the people just from inside the organization. It's done by people from different organizations. And we add a lot of complexity to project management when we are in a situation like that. On the left-hand side, in the cross-functional project, the complexity is the differences and maybe the different understandings of the project and different interests in view of the project by different divisions and by different departments, and misunderstandings between them. But it's still inside the same organization. People meet each other maybe at the corporate restaurant, and when the company does some party, maybe a jubilee or something like that, then they all sit together and they're just colleagues there. By the way, I don't believe in the internal customer that you often see in discussions. I think the internal customer is a phantom. My colleague is not my customer. The role may have some similarities from time to time, but I don't think that there is a true internal customer inside organizations. The word customer to me means this is another organization, and this other organization has different business interests. And that's the difficult thing here on the right-hand side, where we have a cross-corporate team, and it's not just different departments and different views on things. It is business interests that are different. And I will talk a bit later about that. These different business interests are a very important part of cross-corporate projects. And I think it's our challenge number 1 today. I did some surveys, and I still do surveys from time to time. I love surveys. I always think before I start making some assumptions what projects in reality are about and so on. Maybe based on my very limited experience, I was 13 years in project management. I think to fully see all aspects of project management, you have to be 300 years in project management. You cannot see it all by yourself. So what I simply do is ask people, as we did at the beginning with our little poll. So I did the same here and asked people, what is the trend in make or buy decisions in your organization? What do you experience, and what do you observe? Have you observed in the past, maybe the recent past? And what is your expectation for the future? Green is these recent observations, recent experiences, and on the right-hand side of that red is the future expectations. And you see there's a small group in the middle. Yeah, they say it's not really changing, but some of them said it's more and more that we make things our own. And on the other side, we see people who said in our organization, the tendency is towards buy. And the tendency is much stronger towards buy. On the left-hand side, I have the averages. Yeah, it's always between 0 and 3 or 0 and -3. And what we see is both are on the positive side, the past and the future. And the diagram tells us the same. There's a tendency towards making less and buying more. Things that organizations would have done by themselves, maybe 10, 15 years ago, would have done by themselves. Now they go out and find a contractor to do it for them. If a company makes a make or buy decision and selects the make option, this project probably will be an internal project. If they select the buy option, it will become a customer project for one or more other organizations. And it's very clear here that the tendency is towards buy. By the way, it will be interesting to repeat this when we see somehow the end of the COVID crisis. I am pretty sure that the COVID crisis will change a lot here, already changed a lot here. And it will be interesting to see in what direction. To be honest, I have no assumptions on that. I have no idea where it's going to, but I'm pretty sure that buy is not dying. The buy option is not a dying option. It is a very strong business case to be a contractor in project management and do project work as a contractor for paying customers. Here is another survey, and actually made it 3 times. I had this survey in 2015, the first time, then 2019 again. And I asked people, are you in a customer project? Some people say customer facing project, it's the same. Are you in a customer project? That's the red bars. Are you in an internal project, or do you have something which is different to that, whatever that is? I wasn't that much interested in the yellow bar. Just want to allow these people to also select the option that suits them most. And what we see here is we have more project managers working in customer projects than in internal projects. The world of the make decision is the smaller world. Meanwhile, the world of the buy decisions is the larger world today. And in all cases, it was over 50%. And I think there is some growth also shown in here, which coincides with the growth in make or buy decisions. Make or buy decisions is really what is at the very, very beginning. When you have project business at the starting point for that is in most cases the make or buy decision. So we have more procurement done by customers. We have more project managers working as contractors or working for contractors. So this means project business management is a growing field. This is not a side aspect of project management. That's not a fringe aspect of our profession and of our industry. This is really a core topic that we have more project business, so we have to put more focus on that. At least that's what I think. So let's have a brief look. Actually, it's a huge topic. I could talk 2 hours, 2 days about that. Yeah, had no problem. What are the challenges that project managers are facing, and maybe challenges in which they face different, a different situation to the colleague in the internal project? So what is that? Does it mean cross-corporate projects? First of all, it means that we have 2 or more organizations. It may be much more than 2, but at least 2 organizations who tap into the assets of other organizations and turn them into project resources. The assets of the customer are, first of all, money. They have to pay the contractor, so they bring money into this business. A project budget is very easy to develop and to define in cross-corporate projects. The customer is, say, fixed price project. The customer is prepared to pay $20 million maybe, and the contractor says, we want to keep 5 million of that for ourselves. So that's a budget of 15 million. Works in all forms of contracts. And then we have the customer, the contractor side, and the assets of the contractor that we are turning into project resources are many, many more. Of course, I have some examples here that the project and that the customer may be interested in using for the project. I observed this for a very long time. What are really the driving forces for the buy option, for choosing the buy option in a make or buy decision? And meanwhile, my impression is the most important thing here is management attention. Management attention seems to be the big thing in here. Most managers today are overwhelmed with all the responsibilities they have. In the past, they had small markets on the vendor side and on the customer side, and they had much simpler workforce to manage, and life was much easier for a manager, say 20, 30 years ago. Today, We are dealing with the world market, and everything has become more complex. Meanwhile, the way how male bosses talk with female employees has dramatically changed. You cannot just speak as you like, and you cannot be rude to people anymore. So you have to take care of your language as well. And I think that's a good development, by the way. I wouldn't say it's a bad development, but it means there are so many things that consume management attention today. And the problem is management attention is a limited asset and therefore a limited resource. If we cannot bring enough management attention to the project, what can we do? We can ask someone else who also can bring management attention to the project, and that's obviously then the contractor. By the way, many contractor organizations have precisely the same problem. They run too many projects at a time. They have too many activities. They have to be careful with laws and with rules they have to adhere with, and so on. So it doesn't always work this way as hoped. But that's one of those external assets that should become resources of the project. To me, management attention is the #1 resource in a project. If you have management attention, I cannot guarantee you that you will have money and people and machinery and whatever you need. But if you don't have management attention, all these other resources won't be there as well. So we have 2 or more organizations. There can be many more organizations in that to do this project. I came across one probably extreme. I think it's an extreme project. I came across one example, and this was 15 years ago, roughly, the development of the Airbus A380. And I asked Airbus people, do you know how many organizations were involved in this development? And the answer #1 was, no, we can't say that, which I think is a dangerous answer. And the second answer was, we believe it's about 1,500. Yeah, 1,500 in a, I call it supply network, in a project supply network. That's enormous. That's really a lot. Yeah? And I think they were all around the world. I could spend, as I said, hours, maybe days, talking about the challenges here, but I will focus on 2 or 3 main challenges. One main challenge is that the perception of benefit realization, benefit generation, is different for a customer or for someone in an internal project and for people who do customer projects as contractors. This here is the internal project. One example what this could look like. It's a single delivery, which means we have a project lifespan. At the end of this project, there is a delivery, and the project is handed over, the result of the project is handed over to some kind of operations. Think of something like a bridge. The bridge is done, it's finished. Now it can be handed over to traffic. Motorists and pedestrians and so on can now use the bridge. And the project may have taken, for the bridge to build it, may have taken altogether, I don't know, 5 to 10 years. The bridge can do its job 50 to 100 years. So this benefit realization lifespan is much longer. And in this model here, you have one delivery which ends the project and then begins the benefit realization lifespan. I think these projects exist, but I think the majority of projects today is different to that. It's one of those things where I disagree with literature, by the way. As far as I've seen it so far, literature always assumes single delivery. If you look at investment calculations and all those things, they always assume there is a single delivery. Now, what we see in most industries, it's staged deliveries. It's not just one moment of delivery. There's a first partial delivery, maybe half time of the project. And then other deliveries add some more functionality and performance and many other things. And then there's a last delivery, which then ends the project, but the benefit realization has started long before that. Interesting when you look into literature about investment theory and internal rate of return, net present value calculations, and so on, they all ignore this situation that I think today is the majority situation. I'm not saying the top one doesn't exist, but I think the bottom one, stage deliveries, is much more common today. Nevertheless, in this model as well, the most part of the benefit realization lifespan is in the future. So a classical internal project has either all or the majority of benefit realization after the project. It goes into the future. It's an investment. Yeah? Pimbo Guide says it's an endeavor. Yeah? So, and an undertaking. Yeah? It's undertaken to create some product, service, or other kinds of results. If we look at a project from a contractor perspective, then the benefit realization lifespan is completely different, at least monetary benefits. There may be some other benefits there, but one of the main reasons to do a customer project is we earn money with that. So when does benefit realization begin? With the first payment from the customer. And when will it end? With the last payment from the customer. And while the customer may have a lot of benefit realization in the future, because from the customer's perspective, this is an internal project done with external resources. Yeah. But for the contractor, the last payment ends benefit generation. There may be some small benefits in the future, service fees or something like that, but the big benefit from the project is ended at the last payment that the contractor gets from the customer. There's an exception, just to have talked about it. I know some industries where we do customer projects in a slightly different way. One example for these slightly different ways are freebie projects or razor and blade projects. Here, you expect, again, the benefit in the future. One example is automotive industry. That's my home industry originally. A lot of development, component development, is done by companies that do that for free. They give the customer all the development, the results, everything for free. But as a customer, you have to buy now the component from this supplier. The supplier has all the drawings and bills of materials and process descriptions and understands how to make that. And they pay the project back by buying the product. So it's somewhere on the fringe between internal project and customer projects. From the business benefit side, it's more like an internal project, but it's done for a paying customer. However, the payment is done after the project, not during the project. By the way, interesting, my largest customer of the last couple of years was from aerospace. In aerospace, they have this very, very rarely. No contractor would be able to finance this, fund this in advance, what is done here. In automotive industry, it's quite normal to work that way. So industries can be different here. But our most important group is the top one, and that's the one where the first payment from the customer begins benefit generation, and the last one ends it. Another survey I made some time ago, 2017, I asked people what are causes of conflicts between contract parties in project. On a scale from 0 to 5, they don't have the numbers at hand, so I couldn't use just numbers. It's more the feeling they have, the experience they have here. But I asked them, what is, on a scale from 0 to 5, how often does this turn up as a cause for conflict? And as we see, number one is conflicting business interests. From hindsight, you can say, yes, of course, that's how we know it. And that's our own experience as well. But I think it's always good to have some confirmation when you ask others. And sometimes you get surprising results. This was actually not really surprising. It was a confirmation of the things that I remember from my own history. I was 13 years in project business management. Then we have diversity of cultures, legal systems, and sometimes even moral compasses. That's another important thing. Do these organizations really match? Are they compatible in these fields? And they may be in different countries, so they have different legal systems. A very important aspect of cross-corporate projects is it may also be transnational, international business, and then we have to take care about consider what legal systems can do here. What is legal in one organization in one country may be illegal in the other country and therefore in the other organization. So that's something. And then it's about egos. That's the third aspect in here, incompatible egos. Yeah, you have noisy people in one organization, rather silent people in a second one. How can they work together? Antisocial behavior. We often have to do with egos you really don't want to do business with. Yeah, and some more here. At the bottom, what you see could even be things like bribery, like corruption, the green bar more to the bottom. That's something not very often in this in this survey, but when these things happen, it can be a huge problem, The same is default of a party. It's the smallest one in my list here, but when it happens, when you have a contractor going bankrupt or a customer going bankrupt on both sides, it's really, really awful. And I can speak of own experience. Many years ago, I can speak of own experience what this can mean. Another important thing, just
Oliver,
when you come from...
Sorry to disturb, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
There is a question on the topic of your previous slide from Vianney. So the question is basically probably related to the second bar chart there that you have in the diversity of culture, legal system, and so on.
Yes.
How would you then bridge the differences between standards, procedures, and even the environmental factors such as cultures and the way they go about things between these organizations?
Yeah. It's like learning reading and writing. You have to learn it. You learned your mother language naturally. There was no teacher there for mother language. You didn't need school books or something like that. Your mother language is something you just learn as a small child, as a toddler, automatically. Reading, writing is something you have to learn. You have to develop literacy there, and you need books for that and exercises and all these things. I think the same is true for the second bar in this diagram here. Diversity of cultures, legal systems, moral compasses, and whatever may be there. You have to learn that. You need someone who can introduce you to that and can tell you, take care of this cultural thing, take care of this legal thing, maybe even take care of this moral thing. Things that are right in your world may not be right in this other world, so that you understand each other. I just had an example some weeks ago, very, very recently, a German software company working for a customer in the Arabic world. And they had enormous conflicts. And when they told me about it, I told them it's very simple what you see at the moment. In our world, two contract partners are considered on eye level. You are a contractor and a customer on eye level. There is a tradition in the Arabic world. You may like it or not, it's just there. There's a tradition in the Arabic world to see this as a hierarchy. As a contractor, you are subordinate. As a customer, you are on a higher level. That's the understanding there. So that's why they say you don't show enough respect to them, yeah, and you are too quick in speaking and too open and too direct in speaking, because that's not their culture. And once they understood that, and once they understood what the problem is about, I hope they could resolve the project and the conflicts of the project. So you have to learn that, and you have to ask people who have some understanding on that. And I'm not saying that I'm always the guy who has that. I have some knowledge about Arabic culture. I don't know very much about Indonesian culture, for instance. Yeah, maybe you should tell me that. So you talk with people who know it, you read books, yeah, you can see YouTube movies and whatever it is, videos. There's something to learn it, but you have to actively do that, and you have to want that. And one of our problems is we don't have much time to do that. We have to be productive very, very quickly, but still that's something we need to do, learn to understand it better. I hope this answered the question.
Yes, thank you.
Good, very good. One other thing we should consider, if you go to the PMBOK Guide, 6th edition still, yeah. If you go to the PMBOK Guide 6th edition, the project begins with the project contract. Our first process is process 4.1. This is where we create the, the charter. We begin with the project charter, which comes in 4.1 after the contract. The contract is an input to the process. It's a bit hidden in agreements. Doesn't really say contract there, it's in agreements, but the contract is there, it's an input, and then the output, one of the outputs is the project charter. So the contract in a customer project is just there, and then the project can start. Project business begins much, much earlier. And again, as I said earlier, it begins with the make or buy decision. The make or buy decision is a decision that starts this business. When the customer says, we are going, it's still not a customer. When the company says, this is something we want to buy from outside, at this very moment, project business begins. So we also have to look at the left-hand side of this diagram. It's not just what is here under contract management. That's our project management traditionally. No, it begins on the left-hand side where we have business development. And we have business development in 2 organizations. On customer side, to develop the business with a contractor, and with the contractor side to develop the business with the customer. This here is a very typical process flow. There is some request for proposal, invitation for bid, something like that. We see 3 organizations, 3 seller organizations competing for that. One of them wins the business and it's going on for them. The others have to look for something else, for some other business now. So that's the situation we have. I read recently in a book, Kirsner was it, I think, over the fence project management, where you have a department, this does a part of a project. When they are finished, a phase of a project, when they're finished, they throw the results over the fence. There's the next department, does the next phase, and so on, and they go on like that. And the book says, this is over, this time is over, it's no more there, we don't have this anymore. No, we still have that. We have it between those people who do business development, in my diagram here, that's left from the contract, and then the people who do the project here. And by the way, I think there's a second fence, and that's at the end when the project is finished, but something has to be handed over to maybe service people or something like this. So no, this is not over at all, it's all still there. And we have a huge problem with that in project business management, a very fundamental challenge in here. On the left-hand side, before the project contract, left of the project contract, the focus of people involved is on competing. The focus on organizations involved is on competing. Of course, the sellers compete with each other. Each one of them wants to have the business. Only one will get the business. There's also competition between the buyer and the seller. The buyer wants as much product, service, other form of deliverables from the seller for as a small amount of money as possible. And the seller's interest is, of course, the opposite to that. So we have a lot of competitive behavior during that time. Then we see after the contract, we have to finish that. If we go on in this competitive fashion, the project will be dramatically impacted. It will be damaged. It may lead into failure for this project. A lot of business projects, cross-corporate projects, failed because of competition between the organizations involved. They did not focus on completing. We have 2 big difficulties in here. Apart from that, people have to understand it, but we have 2 more difficulties here. One thing is, how quick are people in changing their behavior? The contract has been signed. Are people quick enough to change their behavior from being competitive to have a focus on completing the project? And the other big question is, if you have, as a buyer, a number of projects, like a roadmap of projects, and some of them are in the business development phase, others are in the contracting phase. You are in a negotiation in one room, talking with some bidders, and talking about business development. Then you leave the room, go into the next meeting, and there you talk with a contractor who is under contract. How quick can you change your behavior? And the same is, of course, true for the seller side. It's on both sides. You have to do it at the same time, because one project is in the business development phase and the other one is just in this contract management and the actual project phase in here. So that's a very difficult thing. And I think this is very much related to this business interests as the top concern for conflicts in project business. Then another thing is, I talked already a bit about that, we see project supply networks evolve in these projects. I have a buyer here, and after the contract has been signed, the buyer becomes the customer. Then we have some contractors in this example, and we see the contractor has subcontractors, who in turn may have subcontractors at the same time. We are in a situation where some networks grow. And as I said, the most extreme example that I am aware of is estimated 1,500 companies involved in there, and they didn't really know that. If you go to production, production has a discipline called supply chain management. Not far from me is the headquarters of BMW here in Munich. And if you have a supply chain manager inside BMW, this person can tell you what are they going to buy in 2 months' time, in September, in November, 14th of November at 6 o'clock in the afternoon. What will a certain seller make somewhere, a subcontractor, maybe on the 4th tier make, and then how these components will go through the hands of other contractors, and when this will finally arrive at the production line here in Munich of BMW, and in what quantity, in what quality, and so on. This is extremely well engineered. They have literature on that. They have education on that, certifications and all these things as well. They have everything in place. They have software for that. If they have troubles, they have consultants who they can ask and ask, how do we have to do that? We are in a similar process to develop that the automotive industry had roughly 30 years ago. We do it now. We get more and more into these complex project supply networks. And what we see is no one is engineering them. No one knows who is part of that. No one makes sure that the right people do the right products, the right services at the right time and the right place, and so on. Often, customers don't know who these subcontractors are. And when I ask them, do you know that? A typical answer is, I don't want to know that. That's why I have my prime contractor. They have to take care for that all. Yeah, right. But if you don't know who is there, you may be surprised who you find there. It may be your most vicious direct competitor. I saw 2 examples where competitors of the customer were part of such a supply network and learned a lot about this customer business, of course, about this buyer business.
Oliver,
yes?
What if your customer, and this is in line with a question that we have on the chat box from Abdi Negara, and it's a very valid question, right? And I see this in my industry as well, in oil and gas, where your customer, they appoint a prime contractor.
Yes.
And yes, ideally, they would trust the prime contractor to take care of everything under its scope of work, right? But there are occasions where the customer is actually fully aware of all of these, services or products that are being subcontracted. And therefore, when you provide these services or when you provide these products, you get challenged, right? Not because of the cost, but maybe because it's different to the way that they normally get the products or services when they used to directly contract it to your subcontractors. So
yes,
I have the same here, where, there used to be for many, many years, no prime contractors. So the buyer, the oil company, the operating company here,
yes,
they would normally go straight to these sellers, right, on your
yes.
second tier. But then
Yes.
because they wanted to optimize, they go for this lump sum model. And then culturally, they are still, how come it's like this? How come it's like that? And they start dictating you. So what would be a good strategy to overcome this?
First of all, what you described is precisely the same thing that I remember happening in automotive industry. I was there 30 years ago, and it's precisely what happened there by that time. We had a term, I think it was a very Germanic term, which was the extended workbench, verlängerte Werkbank, which meant a company like Volkswagen, BMW, Mercedes, they did the car in their own premises, in their own factories, and here and there they used external sellers, and they gave something out, some business out. And by that time, if you were a BMW or Mercedes manager and you bought something instead of making it by yourselves, you had to explain that and you had to justify to buy it from outside the organization. Today in automotive industry, it's the other way around. If you say, no, let's do it on our own, let's do it by ourselves. Now you have to justify why you do it by yourselves. They don't want it anymore like that. And the change was in automotive, we can learn from automotive industry here, I think, a lot. The change was driven by, I think, mainly three forces. The first force was ISO 9000, so that you could have compatible quality management systems. They were not identical, but compatible. You could have quality management going over the borders of your organization, extending over the borders of your organization, because all followed the same ISO 9000 series of standards. Then it was EDI, it was computer systems, where the information technology systems inside the different organizations started to talk with each other. And the third aspect was visionary managers. I met one of those visionary managers. And actually, the first thing is precisely what you're just saying. It was called system supplier. System supplier was going beyond the extended workbench to have one supplier who takes responsibility for all the subcontractors, subcontractors, and so on in production by the time. And you see now the same. And the reason, I think, again, is management attention. They want to hand management attention to another organization so that they are free for the things that they have fun with or feel more confident doing here. I think what you have to do as a subcontractor, also as a contractor, as a customer, is to develop a system of trust. The most important thing here is to develop a system of trust. The more distrust you have, the slower these systems get, the less effective and efficient they will be. Distrust slows everything down, makes everything more difficult, more expensive. But now the risk is trust the wrong people and they will rip you off. So another important thing is to go with the right people, learn to work with the right people here, to learn who they are and to learn who they not are. There are organizations you shouldn't do projects with. These people are not trustworthy. And if they are not trustworthy, you should not trust them. I think over time you learn that. And that's one of the learning processes we have. We need to build these things on trust. Otherwise, we will not be able to do quick and good projects. And the first thing that suffers under distrust is communications. You can no more communicate freely because it may damage you later. It's a very broad answer to a very specific question, but that's the only answer I can give you right now at the moment. I hope this answers the question.
Yes.
If I know more about the specific situation, we can do more about that. But I think the most important thing is trust. And maybe another thing that is very tightly related to that is ownership. People have to all together take ownership for project success. We will see this later as mission success first culture, that all together have a mission, and the success of this mission is number one, what we strive together for. By the way, that's the basis, that's the fundament, the foundation of trust at the same time. Yeah. So that's what I would say at the moment. I think it's mostly trust. Then if we look at the people, the project managers, here we see differences between project managers in internal projects and in customer projects. And by the way, that's the first part of my table. There's a second part down here. That's the bottom half of that. In a classroom, I can animate that and it flows up. In online environment, this doesn't really work, but that's still the same table. Yeah? And you can, if you like, you can reduce it to 3 main challenges on a project manager on a contractor side. Or, by the way, also for a self-employed person. As a self-employed person, you're not employed by the contractor, you are the contractor. And there the same is true. First of all, you want to have a happy customer. You need this for your future. It's your future business and it protects you from people running to court against you. Then you want to have a profitable, you need to have a profitable project. Otherwise, your organization will go bankrupt and you have to protect the liquidity of this organization. In real life, this is often the most urgent thing. We lay out money for customers. Yeah. We do work today, which will be paid in maybe 2 months or so. And that's a strong burden of the liquidity of the organization. If we overstretch our liquidity, that's really the main reason for bankruptcies. Companies go bankrupt because they are not profitable. But first of all, they go bankrupt because they are no more liquid. And no one really looks at that in many contractor organizations. And it's a bigger problem the bigger the organizations gets. That's the interesting thing. If I was just last week in an organization with 70 people, I think liquidity, they are so aware of that. They work on that and they make sure that invoices are sent to the customer and payments are followed up and that everything works well here. In a small company, project managers have this understanding and have this awareness. In larger organizations, it gets lost. And some told me already, I don't want to deal with questions like that. Sorry, it's the question of the survival of your employer. We have a similar situation on the other side. When we look at customers, at organizations that hand out projects to external teams, to contractors, and also it's a long list of things that are changing in here. And again, you can condense it, I think, to 3 most important things. By the way, apart from the price they have to pay, of course. But number 1, what they want is to have reliable vendor performance. If the vendor promises me to deliver something next week, then I want to be sure that this will be delivered next week, and unless something very strange happens, which can always happen, as we just see with COVID. Then you want to have VIP grade service. That's about communications. It's to some degree about trust again. You want to be treated as a VIP customer. How often do I see that organizations during business development, they are promised by sellers, you will be our number 1. When you will be our customer, you will be king. Then they signed the contract. And then they didn't find themselves as the kings in this business, but rather as a customer in a supermarket, in a waiting line at the cash desk. And supply network agility. We have new ideas. We see things that don't work anymore as we thought originally, and we have to change things in the project, and our suppliers have to go with us. When such a change turns up, they have to be agile together with us and follow us in that. Often agility is suffering from contractors who don't have the agility that the customer expects from them. By the way, I like this idea with the agility as long as it is paid. That's the other thing, of course. So sometimes customers make the mistake as well. I have here some examples of newspaper, online newspaper messages of the last couple of years, where we see companies in troubles, projects in troubles, companies going bankrupt, and so on. So that's a very common observation that we have, companies going bankrupt. And whenever you work with a contractor or with a customer, it's one of the questions you should ask yourself: what happens if this organization ceases to exist at one point in time. And with the crisis that we have at the moment, I think it's getting even more important to ask this question. Can we rely on the existence of this contractor or customer until the end of the project, or until the end of the time that we need this organization for our project? Then the next big thing is an education gap. Project managers in project business are not educated for that. And when I say that, this is a criticism to myself as well and to my own industry. We need to do more. We as trainers need to do more. Book authors have to write books on that. There is, at the moment, as far as I know, 3 books on the market that you can buy. I know of a fourth book about 10 years ago, which is no more on the market, which you can no more buy. There is not enough literature here. We should have hundreds of books on that topic. We should have consultants and trainers, academic education, everything. We don't have it. It's not there. And that's strange. It's the only business discipline I know where we are lacking, so much lacking education. People don't get educated for that. And it's not enough to know project management. You also need business management knowledge. Yeah? And some people, we know that accidental project managers, they have no education at all. No education in business management, no education in project management. I have a little benefit here because I come from a business side originally. I came from business management into project management. Most people come from engineering into project management and never had the specific business management education that we need. By the way, I didn't have the specific business management education. It was general business management. It's very, very specific what we need here. So what happens when people are not educated for that? And it's very simple what happens here. Instead of education, what we have is trial and error. The problem with trial and error is trial in customer projects, both sides again, is expensive, and error even more. This is very, very expensive what organizations are doing here. And it will be one of the reasons for project failure, increased reasons during COVID, and of organizational failure as well. Many organizations will go bankrupt. And the simple reason is their people are not educated to look at business management and project management at the same time. Some keys to success that I have here. First of all, develop, implement a cooperative transformation. The example that you just gave me, the question that you just raised, is exactly about that. What we need to understand is that we have to build a cooperative system where the parties involved are not just parties, they are partners. So we have to develop this partnership. We have to turn contract parties into project partners. This sounds easy and simple. It is not. It's a very difficult process. Then we have to make sure everyone stands for completing over competing. That's not the reality at the moment. And some people told me, Oliver, when you say this is too simple, too easy, I don't know. No, that's where we have to go to. It's simple and easy, but it's difficult to implement. We have to focus on completing. We want this project completed all together. Customers, contractors, subcontractors. When we can achieve that, we will have a great project. And the way is mission success first. This must be our culture along the entire project supply networks. Cooperative transformation, what is needed to achieve that? First of all, be diligent in selecting business partners. And this is true, again, in both directions. When we are looking for contractors, we have to understand their history. By the way, if you are going to work with a consortium, that's a temporary joint venture just founded for the project. The consortium typically has no history, but the investors in the consortium, the organizations that put money together, the ventures in this consortium, they have a history. So look at the history of these organizations. Yeah? I know one example where a consortium included a company that was part of the organized crime. And this is something that you could easily see just from their history. And I would never go with such a consortium. So be very, very diligent in selecting business partners. And again, this works in both directions. Who do I want to have as a contractor, but also who do I want to have as a customer? We have to be more selective, otherwise they may destroy us one point in time. Adopt better contract types and contracting practices. If you do it wrong, both will destroy this system of trust and of mission success first culture in the project and across these organizations. We have to look more closely on contract types. The typical reason that I see why a contract type is being used is we have used this contract type in the past, so we will also use it in the future. It may have been a good contract type in the past, it may have been a poor contract type in the past, but that's the reason why it's used. Yeah, that's our tradition. That's what we are used for. And we have so many different options to develop good contract types and select good contract types. And then the practices in contracting. The contract has been signed. How do we treat it? How do we deal with it? Is another important matter here. Establish a project business healing day. That's something I did last year, more than this year, because COVID made it very difficult. But that's something that can be very helpful. As a customer, you invite your contractors with whom you have troubles. If you're very couraged, you can also do it the other way around, but it takes a lot of courage from a contractor to bring all the customers they have difficulties with into one room. Normally, you don't want these companies to talk with each other. Maybe it's a good idea to have them talk with each other. Yeah? And then talk about the problems that you have and talk about solutions. You need a third party for that, by the way. You cannot do it alone. You need a third party to moderate this session. We have great tools for that. So this is something that can be very, very helpful, because in the end, I would assume in most projects, all parties, partners involved want to have a great project. It's something a contractor wants, because I want to be proud of my work. I want to be proud of the results. I want to show the results to other potential customers and say, look, I participated in that. My organization helped building this thing. Yeah? And as a customer, you have the same wish. So if we can bring the common interests and make them stronger than the divisive interests, than the different interests, then this can be very successful. A day is normally enough for that. It's a bit like family therapy. Yeah? When everyone in the family wants to have a good family life, but they make it difficult for each other, a third party may be in a position to help. It's not always possible, of course. Alternative dispute resolution. How often do we really go to court when it would be enough to have a good mediator or arbitrator help the parties find a solution that both can agree upon, and do it early, don't do it late. When you do it late, then how do you want to build trust? The longer distrust is around, the stronger it gets. Bring education to the people involved. And it's not only techniques and methods and tools and all these things, it's also about business spirit. They have to take over that there's a reason why we do business and why we want to do business, and also business acumen, yeah, to look at business matters as tightly and as accurately as we look at engineering matters, for instance. Yeah. Join communities, Project Business Foundation maybe, yeah. Share lessons learned with others, and seek external help. I think all these things are better done with external help, with a third party. There's our next problem. We don't have enough consultants for that, trainers for that. Yeah? But that's what we need for that. A mission success first culture, developing that normally means we need someone to come in and help the organizations involved to develop that. So this was my part here with my presentation, and I'm happy to answer questions and listen to concerns that you have as you like.
Thank you very much, Oliver. I think it was quite a heavy subject, but it was quite captivating, and it was, generating some questions. There are a couple of questions that I couldn't address to you. One was early at the beginning by Akbar. And his question was about how would you consider bringing in people specifically, right, to conduct these businesses? Because as you know, there is somehow a gap in the education and perhaps the competency and experience of actually doing project business. So what would companies have to consider when they make a decision whether to develop these skills internally or even hire an organic person to be in that role, or to go and entirely outsource this discipline?
Yeah, I think the first thing that organizations need to do is to look at two things. One thing is how much money are they burning with poor project business? How much does it cost them to have poor project business? Because this is some kind of upper level for a budget that they have. And by the way, even a small to medium organization may find it's millions of dollars they are already burning because their project business is running not as it should. So that's number one. Have an understanding how much you really destroy in money, so that you know how much money should you invest to improve that. Then the next question is, and that's already something they may not be able to do alone, to ask what are the reasons for that? What are the reasons for that is often something that an external person can find out much easier than an internal person. There are things that you see best when you are inside the situation, but other things are seen best from a distance. Yeah, and I think that is often something you better see from a distance. Distant people look much more on the behavior of people involved. How do they talk with each other? How much trust, how much distrust do they have, and so on. So they have an understanding that is not so much influenced by technical questions. So my recommendation would be to try to find people who are competent in that and who can help from an external part. But the first step, I think, would be really to ask yourself, how much money are we destroying? And maybe a third thing is, look at the risks for the existence of your organization. In times of COVID, it's not so much just about having better or less good and less profitable project business and so on. Often it's about survival now. It's the question, how can you make sure that you will not be among those, probably, I don't know, we will see later, yeah, but probably around 25% organizations that may not survive this crisis in here, in project business management. Just saw the number, I think I said it already, I just saw the number in an article, and the 25%, I think that's a lot, that's an awful lot. Yeah. For the other 75, it will probably be damaged business, maybe not for all of them, but for many of them, it will be damaged business. But for the 25%, they cannot survive this anymore. So that's also something one should look at and ask yourself, as we do the business here, as we are in troubles with customers, contractors, subcontractors, and so on, what are the risks for the survival of our organization? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's quite interesting to see, right? I think as early as I can remember, I've always seen the statistics, right, of how much money is spent on projects that didn't get delivered on time, or even projects that failed, and it still is a discussion till this day.
Yes, absolutely.
So I invite the audience, right, to keep the questions coming. And if you want to have a dialogue with Oliver, then just let me know, and then we will unmute you and you can have a one-on-one interaction with Oliver. In the meantime, there is a question from Hotma. How can we deliver agility in business contracts, Oliver? And what is your take actually on the whole agile project management in terms of cross-corporate success? Is it something that is specific to a certain industry or certain setting, or is it, do you think it's applicable here?
I think it's extremely applicable here. I think first we have to understand where the home turf of agile methods is. And it's not just a specific industry. It's not about industries. It's about the kind of work, the kind of task we have with our project. If you're in a discovery situation, yeah, you have to identify new things, like in a product development. It could be software, it could be something with hardware. So if you're in a discovery situation, a situation where the way is made by walking, I love this statement so much, the way is made by walking. How often are we there in our projects? That's where agile methods have their home turf. That's where they are strong. That's what they can do well. There are other project situations where we have to bring predictability and order. And in these project situations, it may still be in the same project. In these situations, agile methods are no more really applicable and should no more be favored, because that's the one thing they cannot do. They cannot bring predictability and order. And that's no criticism, by the way. They are not made for that. They are made for something completely different. So what I say is, in my toolbox, I have a hammer and I have a screwdriver. And when I have a screw in front of me, I take the screwdriver. And when it's a nail, I'll take the hammer. And by the way, I have several hammers with different sizes, and there's several screwdrivers with different sizes and different blades at the tip. Yeah, so I can also adjust my work to the size and to the type of screw and nail and so on. And they are peacefully side by side in my toolbox. And that's how I would see agile methods. It is a very valuable addition to my toolbox. And there are situations where I'm happy to use them and where they can help me be successful, and others where they cannot. And the question in project business is, how do we bring this together when we have more than 2 organizations? Problem number 1 is there is not a single, as far as I'm aware of, not a single agile method for project business. If you follow Scrum, Extreme, Programming, SAFe, and what all we have, they're all assuming projects are done inside the own organization. In Scrum, you have a developer team, you have what they call stakeholders, different from the PMBOK guide definition, by the way. It's the people who we work for. Then between those 2 groups, we have some kind of a communications bottleneck. That's the product owner, by the way, a wanted bottleneck. It's wanted there, it's not happening, it's wanted to be there. And that's it. And the assumption is they are all inside the same organization. Now, if you look at, I think, meanwhile, the majority of Scrum projects, would be good to have another survey on that. The majority, I think, as I see it, is done as customer projects. The developers are in another organization than those stakeholders, users, or whatever it is, on the other side. So where's the place of the product owner? Should the product owner be on the side of the contractor or on the side of the customer? We can have long discussions on that, and every party has an argument on his or her side. I think in a customer project, we will need 2 product owners, one on contractor side, one on customer side. Yeah? So you see there are limitation of the methods that we have at the moment, because they ignore this question of cross-corporate projects. Apart from that, yes, we should use them. They can bring us in a discovery situation. They can bring us the agility, the adaptivity when we discover things, to respond to our discoveries and to do this immediately. It is very open-minded what we are doing here. We understand that every project is a learning process, and we keep the learning steps small and quick. Yeah? That's all very good, and we should do that. But then we need contract types that match this intention and these opportunities that we can use. I just see in Germany a lot of organizations, they want the agile fixed price contract, which in itself is a contradiction. They say you get money for nothing and change for free, or you spend money for nothing and change for free if you're the customer. Yeah? What is this? Sorry, that's nonsense. That's pure nonsense. Yeah? That's not how you can make business out of projects. You have to look where the changes are expected. You have to look where the risks are, who should have what control over what particularly. And so you have to adjust the contract to what you want to do and what you want to achieve in a project. Yeah. Maybe then, in addition to that, an example, take a software project where you do some software development with agile methods, because the software development is discovery. Yeah? You're discovering what is in the brains of the developers. Creativity is a discovery in your own brain. Yeah? And you discover what users need and maintenance people need and so on. So agile methods are great there. Then you are in an implementation phase. And implementation is completely different. You go into operations. You will disrupt operations massively, possibly. So operations who have to bring predictability and order to the organization, they need you to bring them predictability and order again. How long will you disrupt operations? When will you start? When will you be finished? How massively will you disrupt it? What does this disruption look like? Simple example, you will need to train people in the use of the software. When will these trainings take place? How long will they take? And so on. These are important topics for operations. And when we work for operations, we have to meet them. That's our job. So in a majority, I wouldn't say 100%, but in a majority of implementations, you cannot go the agile way. You have to have long-term plans so that others know what to expect from you. I hope this answers the question.
Okay, thank you, Oliver. I would like to, or I would like to maybe expand a little bit on the aspect of, you mentioned earlier that internal costs, intra-department revenue transfers or cost claims, these are phantom revenues or phantom exercises, basically what you said, right? And but do you not see that these practices that corporations do also has a somewhat a positive aspect to it, right? Because when you do that, you kind of challenge them to be cheaper, right? And I think at some point, I remember, I don't know if a colleague of mine here, Jerry, is on the line, but he mentioned in his company, they used to basically, the way that they value the IT department is not the way that they value them now. Because if they wanted, as a simple example, if they wanted to get a laptop, right, then they take it for granted that it's just a phone call away or an email request away, and then they get it. But then when you start providing that as some kind of a service, and actually the other department have to pay, and then they at some point challenge back that, I can buy this at the store which is nearby and it would cost me a lot less. And then that basically poses a challenge to the internal department to see how they can leverage in terms of volume and eventually bring the cost down for the entire organization.
I said the internal customer is a phantom, not the entire process is a phantom. Okay. Of course, the process is no phantom at all. It happens. Systems with internal charges, where one organizational unit, department, division, something like that, charges another one for services, for deliveries. That's not a phantom. It actually exists. But the money they exchange is not real money. And the danger of what you just say is it's a bit of pressure situation that is created here. One department is under pressure because they are now a profit center, but all the business they do is internal business. They work for other departments, so they cannot make profit. The only way for them to make profit is to do it on cost of another department. So what you have is that the department managers see their departments as own little enterprises, own little companies in competition with other departments inside the same organization. You disintegrate your organization. You probably, most of you will be aware of Peter F. Drucker. He was the inventor of the term profit center. And later he said this was the most stupid thing he ever invented, because there are no profit centers inside an organization. There are cost centers inside an organization, but no profit centers. The only profit center is the check that didn't bounce. And that's exactly how I see it here. If we do a project for a paying customer, the paying customer is a separate entity. Then the customer sends us money, and we live on that money. And by the way, this kind of business is our justification to exist as an organization. We are there to do that. And we are there to do this under contract. This internal business, as such, it's not a phantom, but to believe that there is a customer internally, that's a phantom. The customer, the internal customer, is my colleague, maybe my friend. And when this internal business has been finished, we go together to the corporate restaurant or do something else together because we are colleagues. We belong to the same organization. I see the strengths of the model. It has some strengths and you address them. I see the risks of that model. I had long discussions with corporate managers about that topic. And to be honest, the more I discussed with them, the more I got the impression that there is more risk than benefit there. There is more threat, there is more disadvantage than advantage there. And the big disadvantage is that you disintegrate your organization into small little fiefdoms. A fiefdom, you promote a fiefdomism inside your organization.
Very good, very good. Thank you, Oliver, for that. We have a question. It's a very interesting one, and I think it's one that many people can relate to. It's a question from Mahfuz Amri, and he says that, in practice, most subcontractors, they have an intention, or at least they have the aspiration to someday become the prime contractor or a direct contractor of the customer.
Yeah.
Right. So how then can a contractor or the subcontractor go from completing to then competing again, and then eventually trying to complete this thing? Because it's a very interesting question, and it's something that is very real life, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Business.
When I used this word sandwich for prime contractors, it one day came into my mind, because when you bite into a sandwich, it's the middle that it's hurt the last, but the most somehow. I think these organizations should really ask themselves, do we really want to become this prime contractor? Prime contractor can be extremely beneficial and profitable, and you can make a lot of money there, but you bear all the risks. If your subcontractor does something wrong, you have to take responsibility for that towards the customer. So are you really sure that you want to be in this situation? What I saw is prime contractors running into difficulties they could no more manage. They have a customer. My home industry originally was automotive, price pressure in automotive is incredible on everyone. At the same time, you have subcontractors, and they need your money to do the business for you. They need to be paid for that. And you don't want them to go bankrupt because your payment is not complete or late or whatever the reason may be. So you have to take care for them to some degree. And you're part of the business. Your benefit from the business is getting smaller and smaller. The customer eats something away, the subcontractor eats something away, and over the time, the situation gets more and more difficult. Maybe it's a much more comfortable place to be the subcontractor, and I see the other one suffer in this situation. So it can be very profitable. Sometimes it's not. I see what you say. I see subcontractors trying to rise in the business because they see the better business and more certainty and more profitability. And I think if they take a close look, they may find out it's not really true. The reason is they are often under pressure. They are under price pressure from this prime contractor, and they want to be the pressurizing one and not the pressurized one. So I think that may be the reason, but the prime contractor is pressurized by the customer then at the same time. We have to get out of these pressure situations, and then no one will want to, will need to desperately need to change this anymore. Yeah, they will just say, I have my place in the business, and that's the place that suits me, and that's the place that suits the project, and just be happy in the situation where I are. Yeah.
Okay. And coming back to that mission success then, when you have these teams that was completing and all of that. So when you say mission success, does that journey begin even before the, let's say, the tendering phase, or is it after the project is done, then everyone gets together and agree on this mission and what they're going to do?
The difficulty is to define what is the mission of the project. It's not just a list of deliverables and requirements. It's something more than that. I had sessions with companies where we defined the mission and tried to put it down in a small statement, ideally something 3 to 6 words or so, just one very, very brief sentence. And these were some of the most interesting discussions I had with organizations at all, because you really talk about the value of the project and not just some superficial benefits. The question, why is it there? Why are we doing that at all? What do we expect for the organization from that? Maybe long-term expect from this for the organization. So it's very interesting discussions. And the frustrating thing is you come out with a statement that is very, very short, but it's the essence, it's the soul of the project. And then you have to communicate to people. In most cases, you have to explain it to people. What do we mean when we say that? And then you want them to say, okay, we support that. And you have to do this very, very early. Otherwise, people will know your requirements and will know the contractual deliverables and so on, but they don't really know what is this project about and why is this so important and what is in it for me, not in a tangible, but in an intangible level. Yeah, what can I expect from that? Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Oliver. And as a follow-up to that, right, if you have these disputes in your 7 steps of success, do you have any examples of what these ADRs and from your real life cases, right, where projects run into these disputes and even get derailed because of them?
I cannot talk about real examples here. That's a matter of confidence, and the trust is, of course, in me not to talk about the problems that organizations have. What I can talk about is what happens to third parties, and actually we learn more from troubles organizations have than from the things that are successful. Often the trouble is public and the solution is then in private. You may have heard of the Panama Canal, the expansion of the Panama Canal project, where there was huge disagreement between the state of Panama, the country Panama, and the consortium that made the gates, the locks for the big ships, the new locks, yeah, and they had huge difficulties and troubles, and all this struggling between them and the brawling almost, yeah, was done over press releases, and it was all done in the open. But later they found a solution over an arbitration process, and the solution was then secret. Of course, this was then confidential, and unfortunately, that's the situation that we very often have. That the problem may be in public, may not be in public, but the solution is always in public. So that's the difficulty here at this point. So I cannot really name organizations, but what I can tell you is I had my own experience when I was in this business, which is 30 years ago. It's quite a while. Yeah? But we had the same situations, we had the same troubles and the same solutions already by the time. There's nothing really new in that. Maybe one good example. Actually, it's not an example. It's where I took this from with the mission success first. This was an analysis done by NASA is a good example. Yeah, and I can name that. NASA had a deep crisis in the late 20th century. They had one space mission fail after the other. They had a series of failed space missions, and then they rethought their project management, and there was it was called a mishap board for one of their projects, where they said, we do it the wrong way. We don't do our cross-corporate projects in a way that promotes communications and that tells organizations, please communicate more, please be more open in all the things that you do here. Instead, it was so much driven by pressure that communication suffered from that. And they developed this concept with the mission success first culture. I have it from them. So, and then they changed that, and they did a lot of change there. And after this change, they had one successful mission after the other. If you go to nasa.gov, nasa.gov, there's a gallery. And you take this gallery and have a look at that. Images from their shop floors, but also from space, from the sun, from the moon, and Pluto and everything, yeah, Jupiter. If you look at these images, somehow each of these images is a document of a project success, of a mission success. So they changed the way how they deal with their contractors and subcontractors and so on. And they say, if you subscribe to a mission success first approach, and you're welcome in our projects. If you can't do that, either you don't subscribe to that, or you subscribe but don't stick to that, then you're no more welcome at NASA. And they are very successful here. So yes, there is an example. Yeah, it's not a specific project, but it's an organization. And actually, it's one of the organizations where I learned most from.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Oliver. So now I would like to just quickly shift the theme to education, right? Because you mentioned that when education is lacking, then people tend to default to trial and error. And in these corporate projects, then the risks and obviously the losses are going to be amplified than internal projects. So on top of business acumen, and this is a question from Jerry, business acumen and leadership, what do you think would be the qualities of project managers or project practitioners to transition into these cross-corporate projects?
Two responses to that. First of all, about leadership. We need a different understanding of leadership here. The traditional understanding of a leader is the person leads inside the organization, yeah, or inside the nation if it's a politician or so, yeah. So there are limitations to this borderline, yeah, to the walls of the building walls of the organization. Up to that point, the leader leads, and behind that is someone else's leadership domain. We need to break through these walls. We need leaders who are able to lead beyond these walls and accept their colleagues on the other side to also touch their domain, so that they have a more connective leadership. By the way, that's the term that was developed on that understanding 30 years ago by a US lady, by an American professor, Jean Lippman Blumen. And it's one I like very much. And her book is also something I recommend. I use her model in my first book very much with the connective leadership. So we need leadership which is not just stopping at some borders or some walls or so. It goes beyond these borders. Yeah. When we have leaders like that in Germany, their leadership influence could go to France and to Italy and maybe to Indonesia and wherever you like. And when Indonesia has a great leader, the great leader is allowed to also influence Germans and so on. So walls are not necessarily the end of leadership domains, and they can overlap without without troubles and without conflicts in here. I think that's the first thing we need. The other thing is, again, we need the right people. If you have a system where 10 people are focused on completing and one person is focused on competing, this one person can destroy everything in here. It's a game theoretical thing. In game theory, these situations are described. The bad leadership, the toxic leadership is stronger than the friendly leadership. If you allow them to just collide, they will take away your successes and they will destroy everything. So you have to make sure that you have the right people in your system. And maybe a last thing, I don't believe that leadership is a skill. I think leadership is something that is assigned to you by the followers. It's not your skill, your leadership skills that make you a leader. It's the followers who tell you, you seem to know the way and we are prepared to follow you on this way. So I have a completely different understanding of leadership anyway. Yeah. Did this answer your question?
Yes, very well, Oliver, very well. Okay, so I think we are nearing the end of the session. Before we continue, if anybody still has any more questions before I conclude, but while we still have everyone here, if you don't mind, I would like to take a photo session with everyone, all the participants. It would be great if everyone can switch on your cameras and show us your quarantine faces and your eager expressions, and then let's take a group picture. I will let my colleague, Mr. Siddiq, to lead the photo shoot. Tell us when to smile, Siddiq.
Yeah.
Okay, 1, 2, and 3. And then next one. We have 3 pages, so we will go to the second pages first. 1, 2, 3. And then the third page. 1, 2, 3. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Siddiq. Okay. So does anybody else have any further questions or would like to have a chat with Oliver before I conclude? Okay, so it looks like everyone is satisfied, Oliver. Okay, so in summary, right? In summary, I think the cross-corporate business world, or the world of project business, is something that actually has been very close to all of us so far. Many of us hold the role of the customer. Some of us hold the role of the contractor, and some of us both. And it is important to note that because we have all the many parties, you know, involved in this project, then there are going to be conflicts, right? And these conflicts can arise from a number of things. And the top 3 that I took note of was a conflict of business interest, where the parties involved in these projects are competing against each other based on their business interest. And then there is also the clash of cultures, the difference in the way they do things, procedures, and the legal system, and so on. And also this antisocial behavior between the 2 corporates or more, right, which creates distrust and just a general toxic environment for executing the project. Now, the focus on the challenges should be that there has to be a general awareness and agreement on the focus of the project, which is the focus on completing instead of competing these different interests. And there are two aspects, obviously, from the contractor side. It should be the profitability and the happiness of our customer. And the success from the customer side is obviously to ensure that the benefits are realized based on the origin of this project. We identify that there is an education gap that can be fulfilled by getting involved in communities or getting the general awareness and creating more contents and so on the sphere of project business. And the nature of the project business involving the different people and the big funds, or bigger than that of internal projects, is obviously of a higher risk when you try to go the way of trial and error. So that is basically what I have to conclude the session. And I would like to thank Oliver for your time and your your patience to be with us, basically, right, answering all these questions for the last 1.5 hours. I would like to thank also the Project Business Foundation for the support and the collaboration to make this event possible. And our chapter members, thank you for being here, for being with us, and also the rest of the participants in today's prank session. I thank you all for your enthusiasm through your questions and your comments. And last but not least, of course, I would like to thank our chapter volunteers who have worked hard to continue delivering values to our members and the general public, right? Before we close, I would like to share a couple of slides. It's not too long, but it's important.
While you're searching for the slides, I would like to say thank you for allowing me to speak here. It was a pleasure. It was an honor. We had very, very good questions. When I say we need to involve third parties, that's not about me, maybe here and there, yeah. But it's about you. It's about people who say, I want to be an expert in that. I want to be the person to whom people come when they have troubles and when they have difficulties. So go this step and then become one of these experts. We need more in this business because at the moment, companies are left alone. Many thanks.
Thank you so much, Oliver. So for everyone on the call, everyone on the webinar, we've already lined up the next session for you. It's the 14th section of pranks, and it will take the topic agility over agile frameworks. We will be inviting Kyle Griffin Areta as our subject matter expert, and he will go through his approach to the whole thing, puff, pepper, and quest. So it sounds very interesting, and if you would like to hear about it, the registration is open at our website, so you can go to pmi-indonesia.org and register to the event. I would also like to share with you that the Project Business Foundation is actually, today is a busy day for them. In the next 1.5 hours, I think, they will be hosting PMI fellow and founder of the PMP certification, Lee Lambert, and they will be discussing about project business management, and you are all invited. I will be posting the link in the chat box very shortly, and please, if you are still if you are still not sleepy, and it's going to be around 10 p.m. in Indonesia, please do join us for this session. I'm going to be attending as well. And you don't have to register to the Zoom. You can also catch this session on their YouTube. Okay? And I will be posting this very shortly. So thank you so much, everybody, for your participation, for your attendance. It has been a very fantastic session. I've enjoyed hosting it, and I apologize for any deficiencies in me delivering today. And again, thank you once again to Oliver and the Project Business Foundation. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening and enjoy the rest of the day. Bye-bye.